Hello, this is JDM from the Inventables.com forums. We're going to look at some operations today in drawing that you will definitely find useful. The fillet, chamfer, and bevel. Just to understand basically what they are, a fillet is putting a rounded corner on an object. This is going to be kind of crude here, but so a fillet is giving me a rounded. This is faceted from the tool I use, but you get an idea. A chamfer, generally a chamfer is considered a 45-degree angle in most cases. A bevel is slightly different. A bevel is often considered an operation in 3D space. And to do the bevel, we actually have to work from the Z. So we'll touch on that real quickly. Just to you can bevel and set up a bevel quite easily in Easel. Just mock this up real quick here. If that's the end profile of my shape and we look more into 3D space. So if you can picture this as a 3D object, a bevel is actually, it's putting a chamfer across the length of an edge. So it's a little bit different. The first two are we're going to just kind of look at from 2D space from drawing. Basic fillets in Easel are quite easy. When I make my shape, go to my shape menu, and you do have an option to put a corner radius on. So as we said before, the default size for a shape that comes into Easel is 2 inches by 2 inches. You can change that shape. Let me lock my aspect ratio. I'll just bring that up in size a little bit. So I can come over here, and if I want to have a 1/2 inch radius fillet on my corners, I can just directly type that in. And that's great for a primitive shape, to put that on there nice and quick. But you might have something, another shape or another object or something that you've used other operations on, like Booleans that we did previously, and then you want to come back in and put a fillet on that edge. Right now, in order to do that, we can use our Boolean operations again. So in order to do that, what I have to do is I have to draw another shape that I'm going to use as a tool. I'll start with a circle, and I'm going to be using my position and alignment tools again to do this. I've got my base shape here aligned to 0, 0 down here on my 0, 0 coordinate on the drawing space. And so I want to have a radius of 1/2 inch for my fillet. It means the width and height of my circle needs to be twice whatever my fillet is. So if I want a 1/4 inch fillet, I've got to have a 1/2 inch diameter circle, or the width and height of the circle needs to be a 1/2 inch. I'm going to align this shape, the center, to my 0, 0. Let me change that color. My navigation tools that I'm using are the default navigation tools in Easel. So if I want to pan on the Y, I use the scroll wheel on the mouse. If I want to pan in the X, I'll use the Shift with the mouse, the scroll wheel on the mouse. And if I want to zoom, I'll hold down the Control key and then use the scroll wheel. Alternately, you can click off into your drawing space, and for your panning, you can use the arrow keys on the keyboard. This, you have the plus and minus sign for your zoom that you can use, and then you also have a little icon of a house here, your home, which is going to take the shape of your material. So this black dotted line that is represents the size of my material. The field for that is here. That can be changed, but if I click the home button, it tries to center the material onto my drawing area. So not just my object, it centers the material size. If I change that material size and then hit my home button, it will bring that zoom back up to try to center that material on there. So that's a quick way to focus on your shape. So back to our fillet operation. I'm just going to use this coordinate now. I do need to move that into position later. I'm going to make another square, and I'm going to make that the same size. So in my shape, I'll make it the same height and width of my circle. And I'll change my color, make it easier to see. My alignment, the reason I'm using the same size as the circle is I want to be sure of my center point. When I go to align this shape to this corner, I know that my center will be easier to find if I use the exact size square as the circle. But what I need to do is align these shapes together. So this position of the circle, I go into change my position, and I can see that in these numbers, if I wanted to set this into position immediately, I can zero that out. And then going to my square, what I want to do is have the center of the square on 0, 0. Change my circle to 0 and arrange that so that it's on top, and I can now do a Boolean subtraction with these two shapes. This shape now becomes my cutting tool to do the fillet operation, so I need to make that 0 to make it into a cutting tool. Make sure that it is on top, and now when I do a combine or a Boolean addition, or I'm sorry, subtraction, I now have that fillet. So I could continue to orient this. I can rotate it. I can make copies of my tool and set them off to the side to bring back into position in order to do those operations. I could simply use my Boolean tools to cut this shape up. And I'll just do that real quick here. Sometimes some of these operations that I'm doing, they're not the easiest way, but the idea is to go through the process and demonstrate what can be done, because there are instances that you may have a more complicated shape where you can use the same concepts. So again, I'm going to orient this just to keep it nice and simple. I'm going to go to the center and I'm going to put it on 0. So I know that dead center across horizontally on my shape is 0. If I align this by the bottom edge, either one of these will work. I just need a bottom edge, and I change my Y to 0. I don't need to worry about the X as long as visually it's over the top. I'm going to change that into a cutting tool. Do a subtraction. This shape I need to align to 0, and either one of these position is going to work. It's just the left edge that I'm concerned about, and now that is on the X. Zero that out. I'm not concerned with the Y as long as my shape is completely overlapping. In this case, I need to arrange bring it to the front, change it to a cutting tool, and do the Boolean. So now I have 1/4 of my shape that has a fillet on it. Make a copy of it. As you see, when I paste it, it puts the left edge directly up to the align with the right edge. So it's in perfect position as it is. I'll need to flip that horizontally. So now these two shapes together become the bottom half of my square. I can do a Boolean Union since they're both the same. And one is not zeroed out, which would make it a cutting tool. Now this shape I need to copy it again. Now this time it pasted it to the right, so I am going to have to do move it, but I have my center of my shape on 0, so that's very easy to do. I'm going to flip this vertically to bring it up, and for my alignment I'm going to use a combination here. So for my bottom edge of my shape, it just needs to be 0 on the Y. And selecting both, now I can use my alignment tools, and again my bottom shape is the center of the top is on 0. It is also furthest to the left of the two shapes, so when I hit my alignment it's going to slide them both into position. Do a Boolean Union, and now I have that shape that I did with rounding corners. So obviously this took a lot more work to get to that point, but you might have another shape that you've drawn that's not going to allow you to use the automatic fillet command. Say I want to put fillets on these edges, so I might need to start moving them around and getting into position, and then using additional cut tools. For a chamfer operation, we want to put a 45 on the corner of our box. Bring that up in size a little bit. And I'm going to zero it out to the bottom left corner. If I visually just want to put a chamfer on there and I'm not concerned with the size of it, I can take a simple square, make it into a cutting tool, set it to 45, and just bring it up to my shape. It's going to put a 45-degree chamfer on that shape. So I make it into a cutting tool. It's already arranged over the top, so a Boolean subtraction, and now I have a chamfer on that. If I want to have a specific length of this chamfer, I have to do another operation. It takes a couple of extra steps, but again, if I'm going to be mirroring or I'm going to use that tool a lot, I can make that in advance. I can save it off to the side, or just write down some numbers later. So this is a 45 triangle, 45, 45, 90 triangle. So in some basic math, if I look at that shape, let me get this out of the way. So my two legs on my 45, 45, 90 triangle are going to be the same, so they can both be represented by the formula to figure this out, it's not a hard one. Like I said, if you're anything like me and you see complex math equations, it's like looking at hieroglyphics. So, but these are simple enough. If you can do it. If I can do it, you can definitely do it. Well, the formula to figure out the hypotenuse is a times the square root of 2. So in order to, if you say you know that on your shape you want your chamfer to be 1 inch. So if you can plug this in, you know that this is 1 inch, you can work backwards from that. You're going to have your hypotenuse. If you already know what that is, you'll divide it by the square root of 2 to figure out what A is. So in this case, I know that I want a shape that the hypotenuse or the 45 is exactly 1 inch. I can figure that out, and I use this easy little calculator that if you put in square root calculator, this comes up number 1, and it's got enough features that it'll let you figure out pretty much anything you need to do in Easel. So I know I want 1 inch. I'm going to divide it by the square root of 2, and that's going to give me the size of the legs. So when I go in and do my square, I will need to plug this figure in. And if you just do three decimal places, that's enough to get you where you need to be. Unless you're doing something with incredible machining tolerances, then you might need to go more. But for this purpose, 707 is fine. If I make a new shape, go into my direct input from the shape and do 0.707. Then I know what the legs are, meaning the bottom represented by A on this shape. What I need to do is I need to make this into a cutting tool. So the easiest way to do that, there's a couple of ways to do it, but the easiest way, I'm just going to turn that thing 45 degrees, and then I'm going to use the center position. I'm going to align it to X, so 0, and then I need a cutting tool. I can take this new shape that I made, set the cut to 0, go to my alignment, which I want to the left side, 0 it out in X, and it's already on top of the other shape, so it's ready to be used as a cutting tool. Now remember, I rotated 45, so I have to go back. And if I use a positive 45, it is going to rotate it counterclockwise as it goes back. If I wanted that shape to go the other way, I would have to use you can type in negative 45 and have it start to rotate counterclockwise, but this is where I need it. This brings up just something that you might find useful later on when you're drawing. This one will be relatively easy to combine, but if you look at my shape, my bounding box is now rotated 45. So even if I come back and I'm looking at this corner, which I know I want to be 0, 0, now I have to, because I know what this shape is, it's 0.707 on this leg, I can easily offset it from that. But I might have a more complex shape that's going to be harder to line up. So if I just make a null object, for instance this square, put it off to the side where it's not touching anything, change its cut to 0, and come back in here and combine these, my null shape disappears, but my remaining shape resets the bounding box. So now if I go back into my orientation, bottom left corner, align it to 0. Delete this stuff. This new shape is now in position to act as my cutting tool. I can grab that shape, zero it back out. It is now on top of the other shape, which won't work for my operation, so I need to send it to the back. Change the depth to 0 on my cutting tool and do a Boolean subtraction. Now I've got a shape that has a 1-inch chamfer. A bevel operation is going to be something that you set up in your Z, and it's actually going to be cutting. You don't even have to draw it, but you're going to have to know how to set it up. The reason I've included it here is because you can use some of the same formula to set your cut depth. So if I have a .45 V-bit, I'm just going to mock up the profile of the bit here. If I want to bevel my shape when I cut, I can use a 45-bit, and using that other simple equation that we did, I can figure out that in order to cut this shape with a bevel all the way around the edge, that I need to use, say, we'll just use the same numbers. So I want a 1-inch bevel, which technically is a chamfer along the entire perimeter of the object. Say that's my material. And I want this profile cut. Because I know I want 1 inch, I want the surface to be 1 inch wide all the way across, the depth that this cuts down is A on our last equation. So the depth of that cut, set that to outside. Add an extra shape in there. That needs to be outline, or you can do it on path. That will, if your machine is nice and accurate and 0, you can do on path. Set your depth of cut to 0.707. Then that means it's going to drop down deep enough to cut one of the legs on your 45-45-90 triangle. So you should be right around that 1 inch on your bevel. So again, if you have any suggestions or questions in the videos, or a specific operation you'd like to have a demonstration of, visit the forums, send me a message. Again, I'm JDM on the official or the Inventables community forums. Thank you.